There we go. Finally, brother.
Hello, my friend. I
Good
thought
to
for a
see you.
while the hamster had fallen off the Instagram wheel.
I think he was running around, running around. We couldn't get to work on wireless or on the network, so we couldn't figure out, rebooted the phone. Anyway, there we are.
Here we are.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for joining us. And thank everyone for being patient and for waiting it out while we deal with technical challenges. And I couldn't think of anyone better to invite than Mal Fletcher. And thanks, Mal, for agreeing. I think we know each other for about 12 years. We met at Danny's conference. Do you remember that? The Edge conference about 12, 14 years ago?
I
And
remember it well, my friend. You made a great impression.
did I make a good impression? Well, you made a good
Yeah.
impression on me. So let me introduce Mal, because it's always good to introduce someone again. He's an internationally recognized futurist. He's a keynote speaker, media commentator, and he's an author of some 9 books. And his special expertise is in the area of tracking profound shifts at the intersection of technology, leadership ethics, and generational change, and how they will impact on the future shape of organizations and society. And Mal's traveled around the world as a speaker for some 40 years, presenting lectures in major universities, conferences, summits, large events, churches. He's in constant demand for his expertise, and he's an expert futurist, social commentator, and he's on major media platforms, let me tell you this, like the BBC, Sky TV, CNBC, ABC Australia, Canal Superior, and many more. And the BBC arts editor has called him a polymath. Mal, what is a polymath?
Well, I had to look it up when he said it. It's basically somebody who knows quite a lot about a lot of things. And I'm not sure that I fit that bill, but that was his kind description.
Man, that's quite a compliment, eh? Well, you're the chairman of the London-based Forum of Future Innovation 2030 Plus, and you've chaired numerous international leadership forums, which is quite amazing, including summits with the German Parliament, British House of Commons. As I said, author of 9 books available in several languages, and your most recent book is Fascinating Times. It's such an appropriate title, and it's a social commentary for leaders who want to understand cultural change. And man, your ministry and your life goes back to several major, you've pioneered several major leadership networks in Europe and Australia, including Youth Alive Australia, which I only found out many years after meeting you, which was a large youth outreach and training organization, and the Strategic Leadership Consultation, which focuses on producing urban and social renewal in Europe. And you lived in Europe for quite a while. You now live with your wife, Davina, outside of London, and you've spoken for Rivers a few years back. And it's great to have you agree today to have a chat with me. So let's get right to it. There are a couple of topics, and hopefully this will help people today. But I thought the first heading we talk under is managing change, because that's what everyone is facing. And, we already have such stress with change when it's just normal change in our lives, like moving, marrying, and so on and so forth. But the emotional stress coupled to an already changing world, what do you think the impact of this emotional change will be on people? And do you think it will leave a permanent mark on us? Do you think we'll be marked by this and we'll end up with a completely new normal kind of a psyche as a result of it?
That's a great question, Andre. I think, and thank you for the introduction, by the way. I think that what this situation does do to begin with is it reminds us how important emotion is to us.
Yes.
Sometimes we think we make choices on the basis of reason alone, but emotion is a big part of that. There's no choice without emotion. We often say in futurism that the future is not determined by the technologies we develop, but how we choose to use those technologies. Choice without emotion, there's no change. If you think back to 9/11 in New York City, the tragedy of that day, it wasn't actually the work of terrorists that closed down airports for months after that event. That was down to human emotional responses. So emotion is very important. There's no learning without emotion. Every educator watching this knows about a thing called Hebbian learning, which says basically that we learn better when what we're learning connects with the emotional circuitry of the brain, when we're experiencing something. So what this COVID-19 thing has done, I think, Andre, is reminded us of the importance of emotion, but also the importance of managing it. And I think one of the things we've had to do is to stop, pull out of the data stream for a while, as it were, get down from the cloud and reflect a bit on our values, our priorities, Does my worldview work? Is it proven? My filter for reality, the story I tell myself to make sense of the world. Are my ethics sound? You know, can I make decisions that are non-binary, that are not clear black and white? Does my ethical base allow me to do that? So all of that has come out of this terrible situation. The disease is not our friend, but in a sense, there are some positives in it. And I do think there'll be an emerging new, not psyche so much, but in some people, a new sense of priority going forward.
Yes. You mentioned 9/11, and 9/11 had a massive impact even on us living outside of America. And probably the greatest impact was fear. Fear of a certain race group or type of person, the way they looked, and fear of terrorism visiting us in our own cities and malls and so on. Do you think the fear of this will live with us a bit longer? Do you think there's an opportunity for us to really just continue to build people's faith because there'll be a pervasive fear under the surface and could happen again, or another kind of virus?
Well, I think we'll certainly be more wary in the longer term, certainly wary in the pandemic sense. Pandemics have always been a reality. We know about the Spanish flu 100 years ago, which killed more people than the First World War by far.
Yeah.
In fact, some estimates say more than both world wars. So we know about pandemics, but until recently, we haven't had one that is transmitted well enough from the animal kingdom to the human sphere to cause any real difficulty. This one has. So yes, we'll be aware of that. But I think that we need to deal with fear by what I call future casting. And I don't believe you can future-proof your life. I don't believe it's possible to rule out the exigencies of life, the terrible situations, the good situations. It's a mix, isn't it, our lives? But we can become future-friendly. We can decide that, look, the future is not likely to be totally foreign to me. I mean, you think about it, Andre, we're using computers right now that are 100 times more powerful than the ones we were using in the 90s.
Yeah,
but we still fly, when we do fly, we fly in planes that were designed in the 70s and 80s. So the future is not totally foreign. We can face it with the knowledge that the same skills that got us through before, the same faith, the same innovative ability will get us through again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's such an interesting time to be alive, and it's so interesting to see the changes taking place. Everybody's trying to predict. Let's talk about leadership for a moment, because leading in these times is particularly difficult. People are asking for almost, can you predict? Can you prophesy, literally? Can you give us answers? What's it going to look like? And so many leaders are emerging, running seminars, you know, on post-COVID and leading in a crisis. Some haven't even led in a crisis, but are now kind of speaking about that. So I thought it'd be good for us to talk, because the future is so uncertain. If you look at presidents, they're making it up as they go along, which I don't think is a bad thing. It's what you have to do. I think Winston Churchill didn't just arrive ready-made. He figured out what to do in the crisis, and same with all the great generals and leaders of the Second World War. I think, to me, leadership is something that we're going to have to evolve, because to talk of knowing what the future looks like very predictably, I think you could be a billionaire if you knew that. You'd know which way stocks were going to go, which way shares were going to go, the oil price. All those determinants could make you an incredibly rich person. I think no one really knows. What would you say to leaders trying to figure out the future and how to posture themselves? Because people are looking to you and expecting you to have every answer.
Well, I think one of the key things about leadership coming out of this season will be authenticity. And, you know, the honesty, the vulnerability that allows us to say, look, I don't know all the answers. I'm a futurist. I spend a great deal of time researching likely future scenarios, but I know no one can definitively predict the future. If the future was were able to be definitively predicted, it wouldn't be the future. It would be the past or the present or something else. The future, by definition, is unpredictable. So we've got to be careful about what claims we make. I think we can, though, certainly those of us who work in the field are busy drawing from a solid sense of history, a lot of study into history, plus a deep understanding of profound current change in order to extrapolate forward to imagine likely scenarios. That's the best we can do, is imagine what happens if we continue on this route economically or in terms of healthcare. And that's a very different thing from just throwing darts at a map and hoping that you'll come up with answers because you're doing a webinar.
Yes. Yeah, it's so difficult to give accurate predictions. I just think we've got to take it one step at a time. In South Africa, we're on level 4 now, gone from level 5 to level 4. And now we're waiting for level 3, see what they say. I mean, every time you tune into TV, you just don't know. So you've got to grab hold of it and run with it as it comes up. And it's quite exciting, actually. But unnerving, but quite exciting. Yeah.
There's an edge to it. And I think leaders too, Andre, and you're very good at this. I think leaders too need to be able to capture the narrative of the time, an alternative narrative to the dominant culture around us. So people are looking right now for a big picture story into which to plug their lives that gives them meaning in a time of crisis. You'll remember Viktor Frankl, the famed Jewish psychotherapist, who said after being a POW for a few years in World War II, that human beings can endure a great deal of pain, provided there's a purpose in their pain, provided they can see something beyond the crisis. And I think that's the role of leadership right now, is to give people a sense of what could be possible beyond the crisis, and then drawing sidelines to people. Say, look, you're on my staff. I believe we can go in this direction after the crisis. Here's what you can do at your workstation. It can help us achieve that big picture story.
Yes.
And when you have that, it produces an amazing reservoir of hope that gets people through the really bleakest times, I think.
Yes. We've had to redefine what our staff do, because many of them are working at home and some of them are doing things they've not done before. Our media team, obviously, and marketing team are working at the max. But we've had to redefine roles, and people are phoning up people, pastoring them, giving them, personal calls, who otherwise were doing administration, and just making sure we track our church and care for our church. So, very interesting time. What do you think would change? Let's talk about the future just a little bit. What areas do you predict are going to be the main areas of change? Obviously, our shopping habits have changed. I mean, I'm desperate to get out. I was at home for 6 weeks and drove my car the first time. I think it's 6.5, 7 weeks. I drove my car for the first time yesterday, and the red lights wouldn't switch off. Your battery needs charging. And I thought after driving for 2 kilometers, it would go off, but it didn't. So I've been confined. But, if you haven't been shopping, you haven't been out, maybe we start getting used to just a different way of life altogether once this is over. Do you predict any rapidly changing trends? Online sales will probably go through the roof, or do you think we'll be desperate to get out and interact and touch things again?
I think both. I think for a while it's a bit like a boyfriend and a girlfriend who've been separated for a period of time, unable to see each other. They want to get back together and hold hands. I mean, that's human nature. One of the things that's interesting is that, in science, there's a field called proximicists, which are people who study how human beings interact with space around them. And they talk about 5 levels of space. So there's public space where everybody's in a free-for-all, and it goes down towards personal space for my colleagues and close family, and then intimate space for myself and my partner. And normally speaking, studies show that any intrusion into the last 2, personal and intimate, any unwanted intrusion leads to feelings of anger, annoyance, frustration. I think it'll be interesting after the lockdown period to see whether people actually want more people in their personal space for a short period of time. I think it's likely to happen. One of the big changes, though, aside from, you touched on shopping, one of the big changes will be in education. And I've been addressing this a lot with leadership groups in the last couple of weeks, because there's both the logistics and the content of education will change. We already know that here in Britain and in other countries, there will be staggered lesson times, children coming into school earlier, leaving later, which will cause a challenge for some parents.
Yes.
The content will change, though, and I hope, sincerely, that the content leans more and more towards teaching children from a young age mental health skills.
Yes.
Because things like anxiety management, problem-solving techniques, strategic thinking, even logic, can be taught to very young children, and this will set them up, not just for the post-pandemic world, but for the world of automation, where there's more and more jobs being given over to AI and AI-driven machinery, and people are changing not just their job now, but their entire livelihood several times in their lives. So children will benefit from that. That's one of the big changes I see, and there are changes in business and travel we can talk about as well.
Yes. Yeah, we wonder when we're going to fly again. I mean, that alone. Who knows?
Yeah, it's
on
a
the
bit
ground.
odd,
Never thought the whole world would have ground to a halt. So certainly massive changes, and we'll watch them as we as we exit this. Let's talk about the church for a bit, because we really need wisdom in the days ahead. And obviously that is my primary focus. In fact, our theme for this year is wisdom. Can you believe it? Wisdom. Talk about needing wisdom in an hour like this. And 1 Chronicles 12:32, the men of Issachar who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. They didn't just understand, but they knew practically what to do. Esther 1:13, again, those kings, the king approached those men who understood the times, the wise men. So we really need to be living in this season with wisdom. Let's talk about it under two headings. Maybe talk about online church. Do you think that online church will become the church of preference rather than gathering, because gathering seems so risky? I mean, we've been told we could all die if we get together. So some are starved for company. Others are just glad to be at home, watching from the convenience of their home. I mean, convenience now, the world is your oyster. And we really were heading down the road of a consumer church as it was, instead of a contributor, which is really the discipleship model where people serve and so on. With church being negative and at risk, do you think people will stay at home more and that getting together will become harder and harder? What's your take on that, and what's the UK look like?
Oh, I think the way that we come together will change, at least for a year after we get through the lockdown period. I think, though, that there's something in the human psyche that values physical connection. Psychiatrists recognize this when they say that physically connected people with a physical network of friends, are less likely to die by their own hand, for example.
Yes.
Physical connection is important to mental health. It's important in business,
yes,
to productivity, because if we're talking about innovation, innovation is about new ideas being born out of connections between existing ideas. And for old ideas to connect, people must connect. There's only so much we can do in this sort of digital interface. I can't read right now your micro facial expressions, your biometrics, in the same way that I would if we were sitting across a table having
yes,
coffee, as we have done in the past.
Yeah.
There's something about that that's good for our mental health. I think people will recognize that, but I think also that the church will face a challenge that education is already facing, and that is that the need to recognize that digital and offline can coexist very successfully, that one does not necessarily become mutually exclusive to the other. So digital can augment but not replace the classroom, and the same would apply to the church. There are university students in America, and I know there are some in South Africa because I've spoken to unis there, who are encouraged to watch lectures online and come to campus when they want the library or a tutorial or perhaps an exam. Some
Yes.
exams are even done online now. But that's a reflection of what I'm saying, that one can augment the other. And I think the church needs to be smarter in its use of digital. I mean, what we're doing today is greatly encouraging to me,
Yes.
because it's a fairly new thing for the church, and you're pioneering this. But I've been sort of talking to pastors for 25 years about engaging the strengths of digital, not simply carrying the stage of the church into the living room or the
Yes.
phone now.
Yes.
It doesn't work so well. We've got to be able to use social media, for example, for narrative, not marketing.
Yes. Yes.
Now, you may be different, but a lot of churches, Andre, and you know this because you travel so much, they use social media primarily as a marketing platform. And so all you see on Instagram, for example, are photos of churches with hands raised and lighting and music. And for most people outside the church, it doesn't really mean a lot. But when we start telling the stories of people and letting people in the church tell their stories, that's what social media was born for, and that's really connecting with where people are. So, yeah, we will see an augmenting of the two in the wiser churches, and I'm thrilled about that.
I think that we've probably been guilty of that as well, promoting church. We're so excited about the weekend, thousands of people have come, hundreds of people have given their lives to Christ. It's been such a special time. We've watched the kids go to kids' church by their hundreds. So the tendency is, after a wonderful weekend of success, nothing went wrong, we weren't robbed, we weren't attacked, no disease, no one collapsed in church. You kind of just automatically promote it, but it isn't actually, you're right, it isn't social media in that sense. It's really promotion, and I try and avoid us promoting our church in a self-promotion using, conference pictures and then saying it was a good weekend. because that's also not authentic. We never do that. We only promote conferences when we have conferences. But I think people are wanting to see more the real life of church. That's the great opportunity about social media and online churches. People can peek in without coming. And a lot of people have been doing that. They've been listening in and looking in on our services without getting into the building. But it is quite challenging, because really what church is becoming then is shopping for the best message. And it's not quite the same as education. It's not a case of watching a lecturer, getting all the information, making notes, and then passing the exam. There's a touch of God on being in a meeting with other people saying amen, with corporate singing. There's that corporate anointing, which you can't duplicate online. But if you're just happy with a good message, well, then you might as well go and look around the world. There was this online article, great churches to check out during quarantine, and they listed how you could shop for the best message. This guy's got 300,000 views. Have a look at him. And the most persuasive, captivating communicator is the one who gets the views, rather than loyalty or sound doctrine. So it's quite a challenging thing. I mean, look how people follow actors and actresses. Their projection is what sells them, not their integrity. So if you're a good projector, if you're a good charismatic person, well, you have it made. I feel sorry for the small church pastor who's grinding away and giving his best and has got a loyal band of people standing with him. I think it's going to be hard for people like that, because their online presence won't be attractive.
Well, it might not be. The other side of that, I suppose. I agree totally with what you're saying about the celebrity industry within the church. I think it concerns me greatly, and has for a long time.
Yes.
But I think the other side is that the small pastor might be able to find unique attributes of his church that the big church can't replicate.
Yes.
It might be simply speaking very locally about the issues that concern people in that locality instead of universal things. I also think that sometimes when we try to speak on that big stage to millions of people, we do miss the context in which our own people are living. The ones that we're called to lead or pastor, they're living, as you know, in a context that is unique in some ways in the world.
Yes.
And so we have to be able to connect with that. I find it concerns me too, same line as you've taken, that if all we're doing in church life is getting on and off airplanes, it's very hard for us to understand. It doesn't apply to you because you're such a good church leader, but you know what I'm saying, generically speaking. We don't really touch the ground. We don't see what's going on in people's lives. I would say the other thing that I'm really thrilled about is that more pastors of large and small churches, Andre, are becoming aware of the marketplace vocations at the moment.
Yes.
They're starting to realize all these people in their churches that are in retail or, education or law. And I'm a big believer in Ephesians 1:22 that Christ is the head of all things, and given us head to the church.
Yes.
So he's not just the head of church, he's the head of technology and science and the arts and ethics. And he's given to the church so that we can express that headship in all the areas that we're representing within the church. I'll tell you this one quick story because I think you'll like it. There was a pastor in South Carolina in the United States called Clem Pinkney. I don't know if you came across his name in the news a few years ago. He was a victim of a shooting. A gunman broke into their church in a midweek service, a prayer meeting, and killed 9 people. It's a terrible thing. But this pastor's funeral was attended by people from far and wide, and the eulogy was read by none less than then President Barack Obama, who, if I remember correctly, also sang Amazing Grace at the funeral.
Wow.
And so it was clear that this man had an influence in and beyond his own congregation. But he was also a member of the state Senate of South Carolina. And people used to ask him all the time, why do you not only lead this growing church, but put some hours in each month to the Senate? He said, I do it because I know decisions about better roads are not made in churches.
Yes.
And that's, I think, a lot of leaders now at the moment, and I'm excited about this, are coming to understand that decisions about better media, technology, science, education, healthcare, they're not made in church. They're made out there where most of our people are.
Yes.
And I think we've got to come out of this time with a greater sense of vocational ministries. That's a really positive thing for me.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I think lots of leaders unfortunately have been detached from that, probably because of their upbringing or their schooling. They've gone into ministry without doing any running a business. Maybe they've been employees only. But and that leaves you in a place where you really don't understand what people are facing. My preoccupation every day is wondering how my people are doing in business, shut down, working from home, turnover, cash flow, product, sales, consulting. How's that all playing out, and how will they recover when they go back, and how can I help them week by week? Because that's what they're facing. They're facing needs, challenges, and I must meet that rather than preach another good homiletically sound and hermeneutically sound message with the Greek in it that fascinates rather than actually is practical. So, yeah. Mel,
well, you're blessed to have that. You're blessed to have that mixture, though, of you've always had that business sensibility and that entrepreneurial edge that I've always liked in you. And I think that, I think that people like you, and I pray that folks like you worldwide, the selected ones that have that, if you like, will be able to pass it on to other church leaders, because there's a whole army of people in our churches that are just waiting to be released. I remember a young man I was having lunch with in London not long ago, and we're in the Institute of Directors in the middle of London in Pall Mall, and he described to me his vision for the future. He said, Mel, I was working in this company, then I've worked as a leader in Google, now I'm out doing another thing. I just want every business I start and lead to resource the kingdom of God, to make money for the kingdom. And I looked at him, and in all sincerity, and to his surprise, I said, actually, that's not what you want. And it's not what God wants either. God doesn't want you to resource the kingdom. He wants your business to be an expression of the kingdom.
Yes, very good.
And he looked at me and he said, oh, that changes everything, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it does. I mean, when I go into the media and I work with civic leaders, that's what drives me on, that sense that I want to make the headship of Christ known without having to preach at anybody.
Yes.
I want it to come through in what I'm doing. You have the same approach. I pray that more pastors do.
Yeah, we don't want it to be, go out there and succeed so that you can give us your money. That's right. A byproduct, but not the goal of your life. The goal of your life is to make the world a better place and to make yourself a better person through the expression of your gifts and contributing to making the world go round under the headship of Christ. And that really is the key thing with business people. I really am trusting God and praying for them every day so that they can get back in. I said this in one of my books, Principles for Business Success, that if you secretly feel guilty about what you're doing, you can't succeed at something. And a lot of business people feel secretly guilty because they're trying to make a profit, as though there's something wrong with that worship and giving and being in church is really spiritual. But making a profit is spiritual. It's the design of people. And I'm really trusting God for us to get through this and for them to bounce back. And I'll do everything I can to help them recover and move forward. Before our time runs out, do you think church services are going to change dramatically? I mean, we've got this huge building that, we're very happy to be able to fill it 3/4. We've already opened another church building in Kyalami, which is 12 kilometers away from our main campus, and that one is filling up fast. And in that way, we've kept growing. Now I'm wondering, are we going to have to run multiple services and have, say 2,000 people in a 3,000-seater building sitting one seat apart? We always prided ourselves in putting everyone together. We never allowed empty seats because we wanted the people to connect and to enjoy each other's company and not to be sort of there but not there. Do you think there's going to be a dramatic shift? People are going to want to sit one seat apart, or we're going to be forced to do that?
I think there are three phases at play here, Andre, aren't there? There's the lockdown period that most of us are still in at the moment. We are here in the UK. I think that then there's a partial lockdown pre-vaccine period, which is indeterminate in length, but it could be up to 12 months. We don't know how long it will take. It's not the development of the vaccine alone, it's the testing, the full testing on human beings that takes time. Yes. So that could take up to a year. Then we've got the post-vaccine period, and it will still take time to roll out across entire populations. So I've told church leaders, for example, and it will be a year away before airlines get back to any sort of normality, don't plan any major world missions things for about, at least 9 months. Because even when the planes do fly, you've got to be able to guarantee people on the other end have been vaccinated. Yes. So we don't end up with another peak going on.
Yes.
But I think in terms of local church, I think that there will be, for at least the pre-vaccine period, possibly longer, a regulation or at least cultural expectation that we spread out a little more. I've been suggesting in some of our online roundtables that church leaders actually look at holding Sunday-style services in other buildings as well during the week, maybe in business network parks or at lecture halls in universities. If it's good enough for Paul at the School of Tyrannus, it might be good enough for us. So I think there's a way of turning this into an actual plus. We can't fit everybody in our building, but we can go to where they are to some degree with what we offer. That could be a winner for some of us, I think.
Yes, I think the two challenges are the very big buildings and the older members, because the older members are vulnerable and they might take longer to come back. And so that's a challenge. But the big buildings, you know, if you have a building that seats 200, you know, and you turn away 20 people at the door and you say, sorry, we're at capacity, come to the next service. It's not a big issue for 20 people to go to the coffee shop or 20 people to go home. But if if you're seating 3,000 people and you turn, 800 people away in the street, you've got mayhem. So those are the kind of challenges that we having to navigate. And it's going to be very interesting to see, but I'm desperate to get back and to connect with people and to just enjoy that sense of God's presence and the praises of God, as the team leads us. I mean, I just love that in my life. I so enjoy that,
No, you can't do that. You're right. You can't do that in the same way digitally. There's not that atmospheric, that sense of, there's something about a crowd, that brings a real intensity to the sense of God's presence. I mean, he's present anyway, but it does, you're right, it does bring an intensity to that experience. But I think, some churches, and I've not seen this done yet, but I think some churches will want to start almost ticketing services for a short period of time, not for money, but your ticket says you can come in at this time. It's a bit like Hillsong London or some other church does with their Christmas carols. You've got 4 sessions in a day, you're ticketed for one of them. But I still think there'll be people who miss out on that, and we may need to accommodate with extra church services even outside the building, because it'll be public transport too is a problem in some cities, that people can't catch the trains to church on a Sunday now. So will they be able to go to church maybe somewhere closer to home for a limited period of time? That's an interesting one for me.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Well, God is in control, and nothing escapes his attention. We're not a wound-up clock that's just ticking and he's sitting by watching. He's involved in everything, and he works all things together for good. So I don't know about you, I have a total confidence in that, and I've got hope for the future. This, as the King James says, this too will come to pass, and we'll get through to the other side and enjoy life again. The world is both a difficult place, but it's also a wonderful place, and I'm excited about the future. As we close off, one sentence, one liner, one thought.
It's hard to do. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 because I think they fit what you've just been saying and what we've been talking about. One is the future is shaped by those who engage it today. We can actually be proactive in shaping the future. Some people think it's all the sovereignty of God, but you and I both know that God works through human choice and through human activity. So the future is shaped by those who engage it today, whether that's through our work with generations, that's part of it, whether it's through the good ethical and moral choices we make in private life, whether it's through the way we build businesses or do our work. The other one that's very important to me, because it took me years and years to get to this statement. You know how it is. You've done the same. You'll take years sometimes to get to a point where you can make a statement and it encapsulates something quite profound to you. And it might mean nothing to anybody else, but this is one that came to me. All evangelism is mission, but not all mission is evangelism. So when I go to the BBC, I'm not there to be an evangelist. I'm there to do mission, which is to bring Christian worldview, Christian thinking and ideas into the marketplace of ideas, hoping that 2 Peter 3:15 kicks in. And it's happened occasionally where someone will say, how did you get to that point? What's the process behind your thinking? And so I do believe that there are people in churches who think, I've got to go to work and be an evangelist. Actually, I'm not sure you do, but you do need to do mission. And if you do enough mission, you'll provoke curiosity, and then comes the evangelism. So all evangelism is mission, but not all mission is evangelism.
Oh, very good. Very good saying. And really, we pray that everyone's lives in the business world and whoever they come in contact with people become curious. We've got to be salty. People are going to kind of have their appetite stirred. And
yeah, we've got to provoke curiosity. You know,
yeah,
if we
yeah.
you do that. I've watched you over the years develop. I mean, when I was there, you were in your older building. Now you have this glorious new place. And I've watched you leverage one thing to another. You've always been curious about, whenever we talk, you're asking me what I've read, which is a sign of a very curious mind. And I know that I'm grateful for that. I know your people are grateful for you, Andre, and for Wilma. But I want to encourage you today that you're someone that actually embodies a future-friendly outlook, not just for the church, but for the common good, for the nation. So God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. It's been so good talking to you. And pity we can't have you here live, but hopefully in the future when we get back to normal, we'll do it again like we did. I mean, the years just go by so quickly, but we'll do it again in the future. And have you in a couple of our churches. I think it'll be really good. Thank you for your insights. I'm just going to mention before you go, those of you that are watching today, you can follow Mal Fletcher on Instagram at Mal Fletcher, or you can go to 2030plus.com and find out about his organization, his resources, and so on, and encourage you to do that. And he's got some great insights. He's a great mind and a great friend. Mel, thank you. Regards to Davina. Love to you all there. And we'll chat soon again. Bless you, my friend.
Thanks for the invitation, Andre. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, man. Bless you, eh?
Bye.
Bye.